This is List Marine in Sausalito, an engine service and sales business. The owner, Hans, offers a diesel engine course, which he calls Diesel 101. I found out about it through Club Nautique, and about a dozen of us signed up for it. Our class concentrated on the fuel delivery system, the cooling system, spark plugs, and a few other topics. It's hands-on, so we took some of an engine apart to troubleshoot some issues and then put it back together again and started it. It's well worth taking this class if you can find out when they offer them. Call them and find out. I'm not going to repeat much of what we learned because it's his class, but I took advantage of the freestanding engine where you can view all angles of it to shoot some video to remind myself of the main component parts so that I can identify them on other engines. Keep in mind, I'm a complete novice with understanding engines, so this is pretty basic. Trying to see, it's the primary fuel separator. On this simplified one, there's a fuel tank, which they've got here. Goes in to the primary filter. And then to the lift pump, secondary filter. That's the injection filter. And it goes into the injector, into the spark plug. Not all of the fuel gets delivered to those, so there's a return and it goes back, returns back to the fuel tank. This is a dual system.
This one.
This flips over like that.
Oh no, you got it. Sorry.
You can choose which one you want to use. That aluminum box is a small fuel tank, and the hose delivers diesel fuel right into the primary filter, which is also a fuel-water separator, that white thing. I'm now tracing the fuel flow from the filter to the lift pump. This starts to pump fuel at about 5 psi, which means that from here on out in the system, if there's a leak anywhere, it will be visibly discharged. This leads into the secondary filter, which is not a water separator, it's just a paper filter. The screw on top of the filter, which you can see is at a high position in the system, is for bleeding air, which may be introduced by opening the lid of the primary filter, for example. Fuel then goes through this hose into the injection pump, which is very high pressure, some 3,000 psi. This shoots fuel into the compression chamber, where pressurized fuel mixes with the compressed air, causing an explosion. I'm showing here that there's just 3 cylinders on this engine. Alright, going back to the secondary paper filter there, I'm showing that that tube is returning the unused fuel back to the fuel tank. This black part is an air intake which has a filter and also acts like a silencer or a muffler. If you prevent air from going in, the engine will die. But at anything more than idle, the force of the air going in is so great that it can break a piece of wood. So don't use your hand if you need to kill the engine in an emergency. There is no bleed on this. There's no bleed thing here. There is a bleed here. There's a bleed on this filter, air bleed. That's the oil filter.
This is the vent.
I'm going to still pause it here for a second to show 2 parts. Maybe not all engines have this, but the red button above the oil filter is a shutoff button. You can press that to kill the engine. The yellow tab at the back of the engine is the cap for the oil fill, as well as a dipstick for the gear oil. That cylinder protrusion that it's on is called the marine gear, and the propeller rod bolts onto the end of it. Here I'm tracing the cooling system. The white tank simulates the sea filled with raw water. It's sucked up through this hose, usually running through a water filter, and then to this water pump, which has an impeller inside of it. The water is pumped through this hose and into a box, which is called a heat exchanger. The cap At the top is where you pour coolant, which is fresh water and propylene glycol, which gets hot, so the cold seawater runs through it to cool it. The seawater is then discharged through this hose to the exhaust mixing elbow, which you'll see in a second, where the water now mixes with the exhaust fumes to cool that. So what comes out of the boat is a combination of seawater and exhaust fumes. The temperature of this exhaust should be about that of a hot shower. If it's very hot, then there may be an issue. And they have it so that this exhaust goes into the muffler back up here. Then this device here is the fuel water separator.
This is very clean.
And they discharge the water back into the water tank so that it doesn't go, it would normally go overboard.
Right.
So this spurts out into there for the demo purposes. And then the exhaust. Okay, that's how they got that set up. I wanted to still pause again because we learned something interesting about mufflers. That drum thing that I'm pointing to is a lift muffler. The exhaust and seawater go into that, and then it has to fill until it reaches enough pressure to push the water and exhaust out of another hose. That's why you hear the swooshing sound of water coming out of the boat every 3 seconds or so and not continuously, because the muffler, it fills, then it dumps, fills, then dumps. Here's an interesting thing. This hose is the raw water or seawater cooling system, but it's loose and it's been rubbing against the drive belt, and so it's almost ready to puncture. This might be something to look for in engine checks.
Wow, you let us touch.
One more still pause. This is the front of the engine as you'd see it when you raise the stairs on the boat. I just want to take note of what the drive belt is rotating. It forms a triangle. The top right disc is the alternator, the bottom disc is the crankshaft, and the top left is the fresh water or coolant pump. The transmission lever controls both the throttle and the gears, forward and reverse. It's mechanical. It's rods pushing forward and backwards called control cables, and not a hydraulic system. So one of these goes to this part here, and the other, when you pull it back to reverse, I guess, it comes over here and it activates this one into this. And you can see this when you look through in the shower stall, there's a door in the Beneteaus, and you can see this go up and down when they stick it in reverse. That's what it looks like from the inside. This is a still shot of a gearbox that I took from the web. It's not exactly like the one on the engine, but they're all similar looking. This one has a cutout showing the inside gears. The shift lever at the bottom, which is normally hooked up to a shifting rod, makes it either engage in forward or reverse. Fuel tank.
So this is a gear-driven pump, you can see.
It's going up into here.
So this will be in some awkward spot somewhere. So you just take it out.
This is an air intake.
More engine manufacturers are getting.
Trying to see. It's the primary fuel separator.
We always check them in a year, but I think
And it goes out.
so they'll
Primary fuel separator goes out.
really depends on water flow.
And it goes here.
Definitely a spare to have on board. So let me get my little tool bag. I can get the tools.
And then up into the second. This is the lift pump. Goes up into this, which is the secondary filter. No water separator, just a filter.
that like what you
It's
take
got
with you and you step on the...
3 exits. This goes
Okay, so Ray, you're up.
to here,
Here is, I got
which is the, this whole thing is the injector pump.
tools. I love the small tools.
And then these go to the spark plugs.
Easy until you get a...
There is no bleed on this. There's no bleed thing here.
That's gonna be all method.
There is a bleed
So that's probably a 7mm.
here. There's a bleed on this filter, air bleed. Exhaust to the lift muffler.
End of the bill. Good luck. You know? Power. Okay? So on this one, they call it fuel stop power, which is kind of a funny name for it. But it'll say, it says 22.1 kW at 3,600 RPMs. What that translates to is 29 horsepower at 3,600 RPMs, okay? But every engine has a rating on it, and you wanna make...
Here we removed the cylinder head cover, the top metal plate, to expose the air intake holes and the 6 valves, 2 for each cylinder, which allows for fuel intake and then exhaust. Incidentally, if your diesel engine produces white smoke, it might need new valve seals because oil has seeped into the combustion chamber.
It's a coil that goes, this side's gotta go first. There you go. It's just a coil to heat up that you put 12 volts to and it starts warming up.
What's being pointed to here is the starter, and that red cord there is the solenoid. Here's one more interesting thing. This is the side of the engine. The front where the belt is on the right. And the lever that I'm playing with is the throttle control. The rod is not connected to it, but the screw underneath it determines the idle speed, so you can raise it and lower it.
Where's that going? Yeah, look at that. That's going...
Okay, so we're on a sailboat, and here's the stairs. I just unlatched them. And to see what it looks like in situ, this is the 2022 Yanmar engine, and it's got almost exact same, I mean, pretty much the exact same layout as the one in the other facility, the training facility. Here's the belt that goes into their pulleys or whatever are enclosed in here. But here's the oil dipstick. So here's the primary fuel filter. So if you trace this back, here's the hose. There's a hose back there that's coming from the fuel tank. Goes to the primary fuel filter, out this hose. And this hose goes down here, and it goes into the lift pump, which is down there. Hard to see, but there's a little lever which you can do manually if you needed to pump it to get the air out. So then it comes out of the lift pump into the secondary filter, and here's the screw for bleeding air out. So then here's one of the returns back to the fuel tank for the unspent fuel. And then this one, after the secondary filter, goes into the injection pump, which is down there. And then you can see the 3 cylinders, the 3 inlets to the 3 cylinders there. The water, so you can see that it comes up from the sea, goes through the sea water strain, or the water filter, and then back down and through, comes in along here like this, and it goes into this pump this water pump. And then that hose goes around up through the back, right? This is the alternator. Here's the heat exchange here, and this is where you put the coolant inside. So the seawater is exchanging heat with the coolant, which is circulating around the engine inside, and then discharged there. And this is the overflow tank for the coolant. Then it's discharged in the back, which you're not going to be able to see probably, but it goes into there, and that goes down to the lift muffler down there. One thing I'll look at a little more closely is what these are, because I can't remember. These say pipe cooling. They're coming from underneath. I think these might be hot water supply, but I'm not sure, because that does seem to go down and underneath that way in the boat.